Thank you so much for the opportunity to present at the Kuala Lumpur International PR Conference. I'm really excited today to share some thoughts around digital PR. Content everywhere. We are truly overwhelmed with so much of content, and how do we make our audience care? Let me start with our challenge today. We are constantly faced with clickbait, that eyeball versus swipe. The number of times we have looked at different devices and scrolled for a number of likes, our return of investment or return of likes, and how many comments we are getting, that continues to be a challenge today, which wasn't present many years ago. I remember going to school to do PR, and certainly I was trained in the traditional way of doing communications. And today I'm faced with, how do I deal with an audience that constantly evolves, and how do I do my digital PR? Adding to this is the challenge of messaging through generations. As a baby boomer, I was trained to look at communications at messaging, narrative, target audience, demographics, psychographics, and today we have Generation Alpha who you are not going to be able to message that way. It is all about what is going to catch their attention and how long is their attention span to that headline that we want to post. As technology has disrupted everything in this world, communications has not been spared. Neither is marketing spared. But today, as we look at this, and how do we use these different platforms to build this brand, and how do we keep that reputation of that brand, it is becoming critically important that we also communicate out in a different way. We communicate in a way that is dealing with audience that are highly discerning, and therefore the role of the technology in all of this becomes really important. It is not communications as usual. That is the headline of the day. If we think that we can just tweak it for online messaging, that is not going to work. Some of the headlines that we do see is say it quick, say it well. There was a study done by Microsoft that says that the attention span of people is now less than of a goldfish. This is a Microsoft study. And what is important is that we need to also it is not about adding on to a PR strategy. It is now fundamental in how we look at delivering our message. How do we curate the whole campaign? That entire strategy, it is not an add-on, it is not a bolt-on. You need to think digital native as you go out to develop your digital PR strategy. I would like to take a moment to look at IQ to EQ, to social quotient, to digital quotient. You would see this picture here. Many years ago, people were looking down to look at spreadsheets, this broadsheets actually, and today we are all looking down at our devices, and this is a fact. And what is important is, as we look to develop our narrative or our messaging, it is also important we look at the social quotients as well as digital quotients. As people look at your message, what is it that you want to convey, and how long? What is that time span that you have? It used to be column space in the newspapers, but it is now actually the attention span you can capture from someone. As we look at all of these areas, we also see new areas emerging because of the pervasiveness of technology. And I would like to highlight about the emerging areas that includes cybersecurity. We know that communications is an important tool. We know that crisis communications is an incredibly important tool in a crisis. But we have seen that in a when there is a cybersecurity breach, when there is a breach of an incidence of cybersecurity, a cybersecurity crisis, we have not developed what is needed to communicate it well. There are no SOPs in place, and we have seen repeatedly how organizations struggle through cybersecurity crisis communications. And I thought it was important that as we look at digital PR, this is another area that we need to focus on as well. As we also looked recently, as I was preparing for this, I looked at the policy communications, and I thought at the struggle that the Facebook policy communications director had to go through, and what happened in the case of Joe Biden's article. It was truly interesting. We see all of these new emerging areas, and what is critical, what has come across is that digital PR is not a tool anymore. It has now become fundamentally an integral part of your entire communications. And in some instances, we see that it is digital first compared to traditional communications. I also wanted to talk a bit about developmental communications. And what does this mean, and how powerful are some of these tools that has come around? While this is not a picture that I usually share, but it is heartbreaking to see that this photo, this one picture, had the spread of it and the effect it had on people. That vulture looking at this hungry child, all it had was a picture. But the spread that it would have taken on a broadsheet to spread like fire online. And the response it generated was tremendous only because it was the power of digital PR. While it still breaks my heart to see this, that today we are still looking at this picture and looking at poverty, but it got the attention it needed. It talked about the poverty in Ethiopia. It was so important that only this one picture and the spread of it brought back reality about poverty. And as we think to do some of the work that we do around digital PR, it is also critical that the messaging cannot be overloaded. A picture may say 1 million words, and this is one of that I've seen from experience. I also want to briefly talk about the cost marketing work that Microsoft did. When we launched Windows 10, we actually worked on a campaign that was very much deeply bound on cost marketing. We worked with our NGOs, and the uptake following that has been one that was really, that resonated with people. And this is a learning for us too. As we use digital marketing and digital PR, the role then becomes more blurred. We also see how the different tools are being used, and it actually helped us reach our target audience. As we look at the fourth industrial revolution, it is indeed one that looks at blurring physical and digital. And therefore, as we look to also communicate, it is critical that we bring all of these different tools that we have in our toolkit and bring it together to turn it into one that would be purposeful and that reaches the impact that we want for it to reach. This is one headline that was really interesting to me. As we talk about how technology is impacting, here's how we use a story of a cow that can text when it is not well. This is really interesting to watch, given that this is an IoT where the cow is able to connect with the farmer to say that it's sick. But again, the communications and the headline that was used, and why it was important for us to use both the traditional media, where we know that agriculture was the last thing we thought we would be affected by technology, but it was also important to reach our target audience who are developers. So it is the way we look at the different content and how we bring it together to ensure that it is packaged in the right way for our audience. So I would like to talk a bit about what remains to be important, whether it is in the offline or online world. Timeless value remain, and that means trust. When we do work, especially in communication, whether it is digital or whether it is the traditional communication, trust cannot be broken, and that hasn't changed. Timeless value remain. And with that, I want to share with you two videos that resonates with today's world. And I will start with the video that changed The journey just changed everything.
A witch! A witch is coming! A witch!
Stay with your brother.
Hello!
Is the pharmacist in here? I'm looking for 10 liters of Ligroin.
You won't get those stains out of that dress. Better buy a new one.
It's not for my dress. It's for my carriage.
Are you trying to poison your horses?
Do you have 10 liters or not?
That was the story of Bertha Benz, who took the journey of 1,000 miles. She was the chief marketing officer to her husband, who went to sleep after he created the car. This was the Benz family. And while that, in 18th century, she was this woman who drove across the country. She was also the first chief marketing officer. She has also gone out to show how the different things could be done, how she used all of these small things to create what was viable for her to drive the car across. What is important is that the messaging that came through, the value, that timeless value was also brought in. Let me now bring you something from Microsoft from this century, closer to us. This story of Hayan, who created something for a Parkinson patient. Emma is a graphic designer who was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. And it is not normal for such a young person to get Parkinson's disease, but she did. And in this case, Hayan actually worked with the team. She's a scientist at Microsoft, and they came up with the Emma watch. And indeed, today, the different tools that we create, it is not anymore about hard selling. There's a lot of soul in the work that we do in digital PR. There's a lot of content that we create that cannot be focused on hard selling.
Do what I want it to do, and to be able to sign my name would be an incredible thing.
How do we even just begin to help her overcome this particular symptom of her tremors and helping her be able to regain her writing ability, her drawing ability? You know, I don't think we're ever going to get that back 100%. You know, my challenge is I mean, it's immense.
Someone's made a spoon, it actually counteracts the tremors you get from Parkinson's. So the spoon actually vibrates in opposition to how your hand might be shaking, and therefore it is steady. I'm making a very rough prototype. And what this board does is I can connect into it through these wires, these tiny coin cell motors. So these motors will vibrate. Hello.
Hi, I'm Alison. It's affecting something. I don't quite know what's happening. Something is going on with it.
What this is doing is it's short-circuiting whatever feedback loop there is between the brain and the hand that's causing the tremors. I'm on to something, right? I'm on to something.
Jesus Christ.
Oh my God.
It makes me forget that I have a tremor. I've drawn one of them for a long time. I'm so casual about it. Yeah, I'm just going to draw a straight line. I've actually just written my name for like the first time in ages.
I can't believe it.
Mum, it's called the Emma.
Oh, brilliant.
It's got my name on it.
And with that, I want to end here with a slide that talks about the value of trust and the return of influence. In digital PR, as you look to do digital PR, digital communications, trust is the currency of the new economy. And the most important thing that you want to think about is the value of trust is with return on influence. And with that, I thank you, and I would like to bring here the team, the PR team from Microsoft Malaysia, bringing in Dashika and Eric. Come, quick, run. There you go. Thank you from Team Malaysia. Thank you. Thank you.
Good, brilliant. Dr. Jasmine, Dr. Jasmine, Dr. Jasmine. Incredible presentation. Technology, evolution, revolution. Incredible. You know, both videos, of course, Emma was so powerful and well done, Microsoft. The first video, the journey that changed everything. Wow. That's where we're going. That took a few years. And that took about 10, 20 years when you evolve. Now you're talking about 3 months, 6 months. What are we going to see in 2021? You know, Seth Godin says, you do not buy goods or services, you buy relations, you buy stories, and you buy magic. Dr. Jasmine, that was magical. Thank you so much. A heartfelt thank you from Clip 2021. Beautiful sharing. Online we have hundreds of participants, but I just want to catch a few of the speakers to just share their opinion. Maybe Ibu Prita Kamal Gani, you're online at the moment. Ibu Prita, maybe some questions to Dr. Jasmine. Ibu Prita.
Hello, Dr. Jasmine. Thank you for really a wonderful presentations. And I think you're really a PR woman, yeah? And, you know, in public relations, we play with emotions. And we touch the people's hearts. And as you know, sometimes when we say something or when we do something, people might forget. But when we touch them and how make they feel something, it will never forget. And you were talking about trust. Trust or being accountable, there must be a discipline behind that. Because you have to be accountable, you have to be accurate. And how do you see in this kind of pandemic when people are tolerable, meaning that we deal with online, you know, everything was so considerable because of this pandemic situation. We cannot go out, we are in the house lockdown. So how do you relate between the trust, between the discipline, and wants to be an accountable? Thank you, Dr. Jasmine.
Thank you, Ibu Prita. It's so nice to see you. You know, I used to be in Jakarta every week, at least 3 days a week, until the pandemic struck, and I'm missing the nasi goreng in Jakarta actually. So coming to the question, if COVID has taught us anything, it has taught us infinite amount of hope. There is no way we could have survived this if we didn't have that infinite amount of hope. Because what is it that we look at recovery, we are looking at an exit strategy, and with this hope, I think it also provided us a captive audience. Our audience are captive because everybody has to be largely online. And I think if anything, the COVID has taught us one thing, that this is an opportunity for us to seize, to build that trust. If you are starting a business at this point, you already have this captive audience, and many people started this business during this season, the pandemic. And the first presentation is, I look at something, I like it, but what I also look at is the review. What are other people saying about that? You know, then that trust starts building. I think the pandemic has presented us an opportunity to sell our services and products with trust building by design. But also there is, how do you now do it once and then sustain that trust? How do you now, what is the sustainability strategy for that brand that you are building? So while the pandemic, I know, has given us a captive audience, but I also think we now need to have a long-term strategy. We need to think of building trust as a sustainable goal. You know, it has to be long-term.
Yes.
It cannot be something I do now, but then I disappear next year. You know, that is how I see it, Ibu Prita. What do you think?
I think so is that is the discipline, right? Yes. So we cannot appear today and then disappear tomorrow. True. Yes, it has to be consistent. Yeah, I agree with you, Dr. Jasmine.
Very good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Fiona, I saw a lot of writings, Fiona, in New Zealand. Do you have anything to share with Dr. Jasmine in Microsoft? Fiona.
Well, thank you, Dr. Jasmine. That was amazing. As you know, in New Zealand, we don't have as many of the restrictions that the rest of the world has. So I suppose my question to you is, how do we as a world take this event that's happened and make sure that as communicators, we can be consistent, and I use the words empathy because that's a word our Prime Minister uses, as we go forward. Because one of the things that's worked for New Zealand has been empathy and kindness. But how do we make that something that maybe we all do, or should we do it?
Hi, Fiona. Thank you. I had the honor and the privilege of hosting both my president, Brad Smith, and your Prime Minister during APEC recently. So that was truly an experience, and I enjoyed it. We had a bit of a glitch, but one that only we noticed, but the people who were speaking did not. So truly an experience. I think when we talk about empathy by design, I read something about humanity being a competitive advantage. It made me sad that the fact that humanity now is considered a competitive advantage bothers me. We have stopped being human, that humanity now has to become competitive advantage. I think as communicators, and therefore why I shared those two videos, the heart of it, it is not just word, and it has to be putting yourself on the other person, the empathy part of it. And I think I also talked about the cause campaign that we did. I know that we talk a lot about making sure the person who's listening to you understands, and that's fundamental to communication, that you communicate for the person to understand. But we now need the world to come together to recover, to heal. And I think the most important part of that is the language we use. It has to be inclusive by design. It has to be, it cannot be just one that looks at a nation or a country or borders, but humanity as a whole. We need to recover together, and the language has to reflect that. It has to be an inclusive language. And I think that is going to be a huge shift in a world that focuses on I and me and all about my success. And I think that is the way I look at communications going forward, that we not only talk about it as an organization, but a world that is healing together, and communications is going to be that in the forefront of that inclusive communications recovery strategy.
Thank you, Dr. Jasmine. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jasmine. Now, of course, I let the ladies go first. Ladies will always go first. I must call upon my president, Dato' Ibrahim. Would you have any question to Dr. Jasmine, Dato' Ibrahim?
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Dr. Jasmine. Very amazing presentation. You have traced the evolution, the history of communication from the very beginning. From the technology company point of view, especially with Microsoft, will there be a new apps or software that can enhance our profession in terms of data analytics and that kind of thing?
Assalamualaikum, Dato'. Yes, of course, that we use data and also we use social listening. Social listening helps us improve in the way we use how we curate messages, right? And social analytics and social listening tools are emerging everywhere. But data allows you not only to improve on your messaging, but it also allows the product, the life cycle of a product to be shortened, that you can improve on your product quicker and you get to market faster. And big data is playing that role. Big data, machine learning, and social listening are those areas where we see communications can improve. There is potential for us in communications to use those tools. We are not using enough of those tools, especially when we know fake news. What is the role of communicators in addressing fake news? How do we now look at something and say, I do know this is fake news, how do I now address that fake news? So that is another area where we see there's a potential where communicators can play an important role to ensure that these challenges are also addressed. So,
thank you.
Wonderful. Dr. Jasmine, again, a heartfelt thank you. You spoke about IQ, EQ, SQ, DQ, a capital thank you for being with us this afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Jasmine.